Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael O'Hagan. I am the president of Arupe Jesuit High School, and I am joined by a distinguished member of our alumni community, Mr. Jose Madrid, who's joining us from Washington, D.C. This is our first ever attempt at hosting a live coffee chat. And as I become more familiar with live recordings, we realize that there's a lot of variables at play. So we will attempt to deliver a smooth program, but if we encounter the occasional glitch, we'll ask for your forgiveness as we work our way through this first production. I want to give a shout out, a word of thanks to our colleagues at the Cristo Rey School in Richmond, Virginia. They were the first to produce one of these programs, shared the idea with us, and so we're gonna try and see how it works for our community. We obviously hope and pray that you and your loved ones are well as we continue to negotiate the realities of COVID-19. As we move through today's program, we encourage you to participate. You'll see that there's the capacity for you to send us perhaps some comments, questions, feedback live as the program goes on. So if you'll send those into us, we will monitor them. And if time allows, we'll even try to provide some answers during the program. So, Jose, welcome. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you so much. It's great to join you. It's a great reason to put some regular clothes on today. So thank you for that.
Well, on behalf of everybody watching, we thank you for putting regular clothes on. You know, the last time we really gathered as a community was Magus Night, you know, the end of February and right before things changed so dramatically. And it was such a celebration for the school and for the work we do and all those who support our work. But truly, and you've heard me say this a number of times, your reflection was a real highlight of the evening. And in the days that followed Magus Night, so many people reached out and kind of wanted to know more and ask some follow-up questions that, we have an opportunity today to explore. So maybe let's start with the most obvious. How are you doing in Washington, D.C.? What is COVID like in the nation's capital? Just tell us a little bit about how you're faring.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about Magus, it feels like such a different world now, and it was just a few months ago. And since then, yeah, so much has happened. It became clear in DC that things were going to have to change. So I started working from home as early as March 17th, and I've been hunkered down here in my apartment in the nation's capital. It's been, every day is there's a new thing that a new challenge and a new opportunity to find a solution to just an unprecedented problem that comes up. But, I'm very fortunate and I'm very blessed to still have a job that allows me to work remotely. So I still wake up every morning and log on and put in a good day's work. So we're very thankful for that. But yeah, it's a journey to go out and get groceries. Our local mayor here and the governors of the surrounding jurisdictions in Maryland and Virginia have been working to really try to limit the impact here in DC. And so, it's mandatory that everybody wear masks to go into the grocery stores. Obviously, everything is closed. And so everybody's just trying to deal with it one day at a time and trying to find, things to keep busy. And so trying to find meaning in it all too.
So what I hear you saying is you have a lot of time to devote to your career and to be focused on what it is to be a young lawyer. Tell us, what is it that a judicial clerk in the Superior Court of DC does? Maybe you could just share with us a little bit of what is the nature of your work, what are some of the issues that you find yourself dealing with each day?
Yeah, so a judicial clerk or law clerk, as we're often called, we're an addition to the judiciary system here in the United States for quite a time now. I think the tradition traces back to the Supreme Court with Justice Brandeis. And it's really this idea of, it started as an idea of an apprentice, right? And having a young lawyer serve a justice or a judge in trying to do legal research and find the best solutions to the legal problems. And so today it's become quite common for young graduates of a law school to go and serve as a judicial law clerk to a judge right after graduation. And, each chamber looks a little different. So the judge's office is called a chamber, and each chamber is arranged a little different. But a judge can have between 1 to 3 judicial law clerks, depending on what type of division they are. My local court here, we're a federal court, but we deal with issues of local jurisdiction. So we deal with the legal cases for the District of Columbia. My judge was appointed by president and approved by the Senate. So we all have the experience of a federal court while at the same time serving locally, which is a very unique experience and has been a great learning opportunity for me. What that looks like from a day-to-day, it just varies, right? So on some days I get to go to court with the judge. I'm at a trial level. So we have litigants come in pretty much on a weekly basis to our courtroom for status hearings, evidentiary hearings, and the like. And so I'm in court and basically I'm ready to do anything that the judge needs and provide her with the support that she needs at the time to deal with cases. We have a high volume docket. So we have 600 active cases at one time, which has been a very humbling experience of trying to keep up with all that work. And then, a large percentage of that is legal research and actually drafting orders for a judge. And so as a first generation lawyer in my family, for me, it was really important to start this job and as a learning opportunity to see what a lawyer acts like, what a lawyer does, and what a great opportunity for me to learn from somebody who, has been a leader in their field, as judges tend to be, and to see the do's and the don'ts in the courtroom, and there's great examples of that every day from our litigants. So.
Extraordinary. How are those 600 cases divvied up? Of that 600, at any one time, how many do you have responsibilities associated with?
Yeah, so at any time, and it really depends on what calendar you are. We're on a civil calendar, so we mainly deal with civil issues. In a average day, I think we can have up to 100 cases come in for a hearing. And so I could have at one time prepare for 100 cases coming in, 20 cases coming in. So it varies by the type of hearing that's happening. It varies where in the stage of the case we are in. So, I just basically have to adapt to where we are and what's going on. But I do have 2 additional colleagues, and we do divide the work in that way. And we tackle by the different types of motions and the different types of pleadings that we're dealing with at the time.
So staying at home is actually an advantage because you remove the commute from your day and you just have that much more time to be available to the court.
Exactly. We're available to the court 24/7 now, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
One of the parts of your reflection at Magus Night that really struck me and that I've thought a lot about since February is you talked about how your role in the court and kind of the journey that led you there was the fruition of your family's dreams, and not just your dreams, but the fruition of your family's dreams. tell me a little bit about that. When you think of that whole experience you've had, beginning at Arupe and then onwards, how is that a journey of your family and not just yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Both my parents are immigrants in this country, and both my parents came from very humble backgrounds. My mother was a daughter of a sharecropper. My father, my paternal grandfather, was a farmer, and so they both grew up in agricultural backgrounds. And they were able to access education at different levels. But my mom wasn't able to get more than a middle school education. And she was always very honest with my sister and I about the limitations that she had growing up and the opportunities that she did not have and the opportunities that she wanted for her kids. And education was always emphasized by both my parents. And for me, really early on, it was very clear that to get an education and pursue an education was going to be a way for me to bring my parents' dreams to fruition and become who I wanted to become. And so, they never pushed anything specific as far as what they wanted me to be or whatnot, but they wanted for my sister and I to have the opportunity that they didn't have, and the opportunities to have a fulfilling life and have a fulfilling career. And they knew that that was only going to be possible through a valuable and good education. And so, when I decided to pursue attending Arupe, it was actually, I presented the idea to them. I had found Arupe was still very young at that time. I think it had only been open for about 3 years when I first found out about it. And what intrigued me was this opportunity to have a real job. And so I told him, I said, I think I want to go to a Catholic school. And it kind of caught them off guard. It's not usually the kid who's asking to go to a Catholic school. They were very supportive about it. And I told them I thought that this was a great opportunity. And obviously they did as well. And so, through this whole journey, it's always been clear to me that the achievements that I accomplish and the goals that I reach, again, they're shared, right? They're my dreams and hopes, but they're also the dreams and hopes that my parents have had for me, to be able to pursue my goals, to be able to become the man that I want to become. And it's a great and humbling reminder every day, because whenever days get tough and whenever the going gets tough, it's been a great motivator to keep going.
So, I appreciate so much your sharing that, that insight, kind of the experience of what Arupe offers, not just to our students, but the kind of deeper meaning of Arupe is always a great reminder for us. And it helps the school stay rooted in its mission. You chose Georgetown for a reason, and then to stay on and do law school at Georgetown. What is it about kind of that Jesuit worldview, that sense of how our Ignatian way of proceeding, right? How is it that aligned so much with what you wanted to accomplish, personally? How do those two things work together for you in your life?
Yeah, so I applied to 10 colleges and universities, and 9 of them were Jesuit. I knew early on that I really felt that I was able to grow as a person, and I really felt that I connected with the Jesuit values that Arupe introduced to me early on. The idea of really finding God in all things, as cliche as it sometimes sounds, was just such a revolutionary idea to me early on, as a kid, and to see what that meant regarding my education, and to see what that meant, becoming a man for others, and what that those goals and those values aspired to was really something that I wanted to keep growing in. I remembered from not just in our theology classes, but in our English classes, in our civics classes, how we were able to bring real world problems and address them. And I became a better student and a better scholar because of the issues that we tackled. Right, I think a Jesuit education deals with hard issues and hard topics and runs straight to them. We don't try to deviate from what's hard. We don't try to avoid the hard issues. And I really valued that. I really valued that, a Jesuit education pushed you to trying to find answers to, politically difficult questions, to theologically difficult questions that impact everyday lives. And the value that a Jesuit education put on, serving the poor and serving those at the margins. I really thought that for me, that gave me a motivation and gave me that passion to pursue an education that had a value. I saw that also embodied in many of the teachers that worked at Arupe through their own Jesuit experiences, but also even through my corporate work study program. I worked for a gentleman whose whole family had been Jesuit educated, who had been educated himself. And he told me this funny story that has always stuck with me, which he said, once the Jesuits get a hold of you, and once you drink the Kool-Aid, there's no letting go. They have you for life. And that's been true. There's many Jesuits who I now call friends, and Father Planning, who was our founding president, left Arupe the same year that I graduated, and he left for Chile, and then shortly thereafter was reassigned to a school here in DC. So I'm not saying that was on purpose, but clearly it's always followed. The Jesuits have always followed me and have kept an eye on me. So.
Well, first of all, I can't believe you dropped Father Planning into my interview. It's always Father Planning. I actually saw him yesterday and talked to him on a video conference, so he's doing well. Okay. You've talked and you alluded to it a little bit, but this desire for a life that has purpose, right? And I mean, Father Arupe, obviously our namesake, but also the author of this kind of the revitalization, the refocusing of the mission of Jesuit education to be men and women for others, men and women in the service of others. And that the magis, right, this other great notion, is not just the more in terms of collecting things, but to pursue the more in some targeted way. How do you see that influencing your chosen career to be a lawyer, the desire to be a clerk, so you can get the broadest experience? How does that all work for you?
Yeah, at the core of what it means to be a lawyer, at least for me, is to be an advocate, and to be an advocate for others, right? Your mission is that you represent somebody else, and you're literally providing a voice and representation for somebody who doesn't have that. And that was very symbolical to me of this idea of, bringing a voice to the voiceless. And that really intrigued me, the idea to be able to provide assistance to those that needed it, the idea of interpreting the law and bringing justice, or in the pursuit of justice, was something that filled me with a lot of passion from early on. And when I decided what I wanted to do next, I did a lot of reflecting, as our Jesuit tradition asks of us. And I thought about the different experiences that I had enjoyed and what I had enjoyed the most. And it was that human interaction and that human relationship that you build between somebody that has the opportunity to help others. And so when I was still in law school, there's a great opportunity for law students to start practicing law. And I was very eager to start doing that through what they call legal clinics. And I started volunteering in federal court, federal immigration court, and started doing pro bono work for people who were detained. And I can't tell you what a religious experience that was for me, in a way, spiritual experience that was for me, in a way that I didn't even anticipate. But when I had my first clients, I had to go before the court. My clients were only present by video teleconference. Getting a hold of them was a whole challenge.
Yes.
And many of the people who were in these detention centers were, of course, immigrants who were undocumented and were trying to pursue refugee status, who were fleeing their countries for various reasons. And I remember one case in particular that just struck me so hard. It was a man who had faced abuse as a child, and who had just had a really rough life, and had made some unwise decisions that led him to being detained. And we were trying to get bond for him, and I had to work with his family in order to be able to properly represent him and get him all the evidence that I needed in order to prove to the court that he qualified for bond. And as I worked with this family, it became clear to me that whatever consequence I reached for this man was not only going to impact his life, but it was going to impact his children, his wife. His children were in court, and tears were streaming down their face. And, I fought very hard for this person, and they were able to achieve getting bond. But after that experience, having to explain to the family, right? Everybody left, and it was kind of it's not always very clear in courts what's happened, who's won. If you don't know the lingo, it could be very confusing. And I just saw everybody leave. And of course, I had a mentor and somebody who was sponsoring me to represent people, right? I wasn't just thrown in there by myself. But I just saw, everybody leaving the courtroom, and the families kind of being so confused about what was going on. And I stepped to the side, and I asked my sponsoring lawyer if I could conference with the family. And she said, "What for?" And I said, "I want to explain to them what's just happened to, and what will happen to their father." And that human interaction, explaining to a child difficult legal concepts, I don't wish that challenge upon anybody without preparation, right? It was extremely humbling, to be able to do this, and to see the appreciation that they had. My everyday in court, I'm always reminded that the judiciary is neutral, right? We are the judge is the refugee, it's the referee, if you will, and can't be partial to either side. She can't help the plaintiff, or can't help the defendant, and we just have to make sure that everything gets done legally correct. That being said, there's at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people, and we're still dealing with people's lives, and we're still dealing with if people are in court, something has gone wrong. And to simply remember that, and to simply remember to be courteous to somebody, and to have patience with them.
The human element.
Yeah.
Wow.
Every time I step into court, I'm reminded of that this is,
that's the gospel come to life, right?
Right.
Is that interaction among people. So let's stay with the judiciary for a second, because there are some questions people are sending in, and that's kind of cool. Sure. One of the questions comes from a good friend of ours who himself is a lawyer, and he just wonders, what's the docket like in this spring? How much is actually coming before the court? How much of the court's operations have been impacted by the virus?
Sure. I mean, every court in different jurisdictions has addressed this issue differently, right? Our chief judge has told the deadlines and has extended the deadlines for what is currently being filed. So any current case um, is being extended and has basically been put on hold until after May 15th. Judges are able to rule on anything that is ripe, meaning anything that has no deadlines, anything that has already been briefed by both sides. And so that has been an ability, if you will, to allow us to catch up on past work.
On the backlog, yeah.
Yeah, so we've been able to issue orders on anything that, again, didn't have an outstanding deadline, and the court is able to issue. The court is still obviously operating. Like I said, I'm in the civil division, so we do get emergency cases filed every now and then. However, I think what's been the hardest to manage has been the criminal docket. We have constitutional rights that provide somebody who's been detained to go before a judge to determine bond, and so that has been a complicated issue. Again, we're dealing with changes as they happen. And so, as far as it goes here in DC, I know the federal courts have continued to have some limited briefings. At some point, courts will be equipped with video teleconferencing. We're hoping to do the same in the coming time. Legal legislation that was recently passed will have some impact as far as foreclosure cases, which I think we're going to start to see. So we haven't fully had the impact of that, but I anticipate that we'll have an influx as things begin to settle and
the consequences of everything starts to come more prominent. Yeah, I'm sure.
Right.
And is May 15th, at least for the moment, that's the stay-at-home policy in DC is until May 15th?
Yes. So our mayor extended it. Extended the emergency time of stay at home in early or mid-April to May 15th. And we had our chief had already told the deadlines to May 15th. So they both kind of just matched. It could again be extended.
Yeah.
So
my God, by May 15th, you won't recognize the sun. You'll be like one of those bad vampire movies. Kind of
yeah, exactly.
Shielding your eyes. So, hey, our next question comes from a name you might recognize and is a familiar friend of Arupe, but Mr. Mallory, who is
yes.
long held the role of work study director and who was responsible for employing Jose back in the day, just wonders, you worked at Wells Fargo years ago, and if I remember, there was a very nice picture of you inhabiting a corner office with a heck of a view as a 15-year-old, which to this day I think is nicer than any office I've ever had. But when you were working at Wells Fargo, had you thought about law even then? Was that part of the thinking, or was it really more just the corporate experience kind of prepared you for the challenges that lie ahead?
Yeah, well, shout out to Mr. Mallory. He was actually my algebra teacher my freshman year. So he started at Arupe teaching. So, I owe him for all my great accounting abilities. But yes, so I worked at Wells Fargo.
Are they in fact great accounting abilities, or is that why you went to law?
I mean, I believe it or not, I still have to deal with numbers as a lawyer. You have to realize how many hours you're billing, which as a law clerk I haven't had to do. But yeah, so I worked at a public finance firm through Wells Fargo's for my 4 years at Arupe. Which exposed me to, the municipal bond industry and corporate America in and of itself. I have to admit, when I was
was that also where the Georgetown bias began to emerge?
A little bit. So my boss, actually, his whole family had gone to Georgetown, and he was the one person who hadn't been able to make it, and he went to Marquette. So I still feel bad for him for that to this day. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the work that I did there. But as a kid, the two things that always seemed, like the thing you became in life to be successful was either being a doctor or being a lawyer. And so I was, a quirky little kid who always, actually, I wanted to be a judge first. And I
Of
remember,
course he did. Right, yeah.
yeah. And the person who told me that I had to be a lawyer before being a judge was, and I have to bring him up again, but it's Father Planning. He interviewed me to go to a Rupe. We all have an interview if you're applying to attend a Rupe. And at the interview, he and another teacher who was doing the interview asked, "So what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Oh, I want to be a judge." And it kind of took them back a bit. And they asked, "Well, why?" I said, "Oh, well, my mom is a great judge." And again, they got a little confused. And I said, "Okay, well, she's not literally a judge." And, she just
She's the
went,
judge in our house.
but she's the trial judge and she's the appellate judge and she's the Supreme Court in our house. And I
Yeah.
think she's actually really good at it. And I think I would be really good at being a judge. And of course, Father laughed and had a great chuckle about it and said, "Well, you have to be a lawyer before you become a judge first." And I said, "Well, I guess I could do that first too." But in public finance, there's a bond counsel, and lawyers, make sure that the transactions occur
Sure.
properly.
Yeah.
And so I got to work with our bond counsels. We had great bond counsels, and it was fun because there's calls called due diligence calls, where you basically go through all the problems or potential problems that can arise from an issue, and you try to solve them. And they tend to be a little dry and a little boring. And I loved being on due diligence calls, right? Because it was like I got to hear lawyers be lawyerly. And in college, I actually interned at a public finance firm as well up in New York, in your neck of the woods. And they thought it was the most bizarre thing that I asked to be on due diligence calls. And so, I think it was really evident to me that was, that the law was really where I wanted to go. And, that helped narrow my ideas about what I wanted to do after college. But I was still very, very, very skeptical about how I was going to pay for it. So I had given up on the idea of going to law school.
Father Planning didn't mention that in the interview, how you pay for those things.
Yeah, no, he didn't. He did not mention that was a mortgage worth of debt for many.
We wanted to get you in the door first, then we'll cover the details.
Exactly.
I'm listening to you talk about work with bond counsel and due diligence calls and the experience of interning up in the city. And appreciate that, some of those experiences were when you were as young as 15, 16, 17 years old. Yeah. And that, I connect back to another portion of your talk where you mentioned kind of that internal push you had to always set the bar higher. And that's always great. And obviously you're not where you are without doing that. But the second part of your observation is what resonates with me. You said you had to learn how not to be afraid of failing. Mm-hmm. So to overcome the fear of failing, the what if. Tell us a little bit maybe about how Rupe helped prepare you for that, because I'm sure there had to be a moment where you thought to yourself, that's it, I'm done. It's just too much, too many things going on, whether at a Rupe or the Georgetown experience where you're thousands of miles away from your home. So how does that all tie together? That ability to persevere and to couple that with that ability to learn that, don't be afraid that you might fail.
Yeah, it was definitely a hard lesson to learn, and I was exposed to it early on as a kid, which I'm very thankful for, because once you feel what a failure feels like and what it tastes like and what it is to fail, I think then you're less scared about it, right? The whole idea at 14, I was 14 when I started at the bank, and no one in my family had ever put on a tie to go to work. And so it was terrified.
Yeah, right,
I had
sure.
no idea. And so I still remember my very first day at work. We went in for a special training. So all four Arupe students went in so that we could all have a training as a group and get to know each other for the first time, because we each worked individual days. And I remember walking in. I first thought I was going to work as a bank teller. They gave me my job assignment and said Wells Fargo. I thought I was going to be, cashing checks or something like that. Had no idea what brokerage services meant. And then
Yeah,
I got there, and there's these piles of folders in front of me, and they're explaining to me that, these have bonds that are worth thousands and millions of dollars in some cases. And all I took away from it was that we helped make fire trucks. We helped finance fire trucks. And so when I got home, I told my parents, like, they said, "How did it go?" And I said, "I'm going to help, people make fire trucks and buildings and stuff like that." And, but that first,
sure.
the drive to the bank that first day, I felt I could hear my heart beating. Um, and of course that didn't stop. Every day was a new experience as a kid. Every Friday that I went in, and my bosses had high expectations for me. And at the same time, I was also trying to be a good student, right? And so there were always there was always a challenge, and there was always this constant need to be able to perform at a level that I didn't think I could perform, because I didn't know if this was the very first time I was performing at that level.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so it was.
So what was it then that rooted you? So, when your heart is racing, or it's kind of the overwhelming nature of the curriculum and the work study experience, what rooted you to kind of, push further?
It was this idea that that was taught early on at Arupe, that when the bar gets set at a certain place for us, it's just a marker. There's nothing that is keeping us from going up and beyond. And so at Arupe, again, it was always, you were a great advocate of this in many of your monologue speeches to us, telling us that, our teachers held
Were
us.
they monologues or were they speeches? Which one?
Well, I couldn't tell because they were just very long, but they fit both the definition of both. But it was this idea that when you hold yourself to a standard, if you make it, great. If you don't, that's just another opportunity to keep trying, right? It's not one try and it ends there, right? And so, I took classes in college that I were challenging, and I didn't think I knew anything about it, and they were some of the most rewarding classes. I took risks and applied to programs that were very competitive. And so in some ways it was also this idea of realizing that the experiences that I had at Arupe, the experiences that I had had in my life, were enough to make me a competitive candidate. And that took time to appreciate that too, right? That the an Arupe education is a phenomenal education, and makes you, a very competitive candidate for any type of academic program that you're going into, and it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge, lifelong.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Maybe let's stay with that idea of transitions for a second. So many parts of this are hard, right? We had a pivot within 24 hours. It was a Thursday night that the governor's order came out. You had a Friday to kind of wrap things up, and then we haven't seen our kiddos since then. So lots of challenges associated with that. Perhaps one of the greatest, and the one that produces sadness throughout the school, is we don't get to recognize our seniors the way they deserve, right? And we don't kind of get to finish the story with them. And part of that is, having those final conversations with them about the transition to college, about some of those realities that they're going to see, and then how they are prepared to meet those challenges. Well, if we were to share with them some of the Jose Madrid wisdom, what would you share with them from your experience of that transition from Arupe to Georgetown? What's going to serve them best as they make that change?
Sure. It's always easy to be positive when things are going well, right? And I think it is in moments of darkness, if you will, if in moments of challenge, that we really get to figure out who we are and what we stand for, and prove to ourselves how much we're able to actually handle. And so I think the first thing that I would say is always remember what matters to you, and what um, drives you. It's very hard to wake up in the morning if you're not driven by something. And so to find what you're passionate about and what motivates you is a great, propeller. And so asking those questions, and especially as a young kid, that's hard. And sometimes you don't have all the answers. But I think at the core of many of our families at Arupe is this idea of our families wanting to do justice to our family's dreams, as I spoke about earlier. And so reminding ourselves, why are we doing what we're doing, and what is it at the end of the day? And the other thing is, staying grounded in your values and your core beliefs. Again, our a great example for us being Arupe, he had a rough time when he went out and served, and he was imprisoned
Sure.
in Japan, and he was in solitary confinement for years. And yet he came out of that solitary confinement with so much faith, with so much inner understanding of who he was and what he wanted to do with his gifts. And I really think that it was that solitary confinement that he underwent that gave him the motivation to turn the Jesuits around and to bring the change that he did to the society. So all that being said, whether that's with daily prayer, whether that's with journaling, I think it's important to ground ourselves every day. The examine is a great thing that we do at Arupe every day. So just because it's not broadcasted by and read by Father Leo every day, I would encourage our Arupe generals to still do that prayer. I often visited our chapel and found some solace in the ambiguity of life, right? Through God's goals for us. But that brings me to a question for you. I know a lot of change has been happening for Arupe. Um, what's going on with the school right now, and how are you staying connected with our corporate work study sponsors and our families?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's challenging. It'd be silly to suggest otherwise. Many of the same challenges that we're all facing right now, right? This sense of isolation, the sense of kind of being uprooted, and you've mentioned it so many times in just this brief conversation. But we're rooted in relationship. I mean, that's the mission of the Society of Jesus. If you think of this idea of cura personalis and care for the individual, that's made manifest by the way we work with young people and with families every day. It's the way we work with our work study sponsors. The folks who make the decisions to hire the kids in the first place, and then supervisors, those extraordinary women and men who work with our kids every day. We're removed from all of that. I'm so appreciative of our faculty. As you well know, they're the best of the best. And the way that they've managed this transition to online learning is extraordinary. I mean, this is not what we're geared for. It's not what we've spent years building. It. Our curriculum is meant to be delivered in person. And now we're trying to do it through technology. I think of our families and, moms and dads, and so many of whom who've been impacted disproportionately by the effects of the virus, employment issues, concerns about food and rent and all those kinds of things. So we're just trying to be present, communication daily. I think that outreach has been extraordinary. The outreach to our work study partners, I mean, I talk all the time about community, and that's a two-way street. So we've been trying to connect with partners just to see how they're doing. This is a heck of a time for them as well. And there's a lot of friendships, a lot of companies who, I think we have 15 companies who are going to get their 10-year recognition this year. So a lot of personal relationships, and so outreach to see how they're doing, and can we be an asset in service to them. And then trying to plan, we're a school rooted in hope. So trying to plan for what the transition will be back to in-person school, in-person work. Want to do that in all the healthy and appropriate ways, but we want to do that, so that's where we are. I will tell you this, the longer this goes on, the harder it's getting. People are weary. Our access to the kids in terms of supporting them around the issues of anxiety and all those related topics, that's real and it's powerful. So in all of that, we're working through it, but we want to do better always.
And of course, you have an incoming class that will be coming in for next semester. Have you guys begun?
Yeah, extraordinary. We I think the class is full. I defer to Father Nugent on that, but we always want to be near 120 to 125 freshmen, and I think that number is holding strong. The last 6-7 weeks, we've done remote interviews. We've been still filling out applications and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're close to it. That's the other side of the equation, right? The seniors who we're losing and we can't have contact with to kind of embrace, right? And tell them how much we love them,
Right.
how much we appreciate them. That's hard. But then we have all these families that we're getting to meet for the first time, and we want to explain to them what is the promise of Arupe. And we're trying to figure out how to do that well, how to make that transition. Still well over 45 different schools sending kids to Arupe. So a lot of different experience of school prior to Arupe. And so how do we get kids on the same page? And can we do our summer programming? We're just trying to work through all of that, but we're so excited to have so many families who remain committed to what Arupe offers and who want what you wanted, right? Back in 2006, was that right?
2006, yeah.
Oh, yeah. God, was I young then.
You didn't have as many gray hairs as you do now, I'll tell you that.
Oh, that's true. On all of which are evident today. So, hey, listen, I know the court needs your good work. So, as we wrap this up, and I think of all our friends who joined us, I'm mindful. I was talking to Father Fryer about this before we began, but today's gospel is that it's that wonderful story of Christ proclaiming that I am the bread of life. Those of you who come to me will not hunger. And it's been great in this season of Easter. So many of the readings are these stories of hope, this kind of the hope of the resurrection, which is the root of our faith. But the hope we need to be thinking about in this time of COVID. But for those of us at Arupe, we're mindful that we're a school rooted in the gospel, and the hope of the gospel is the hope we try to convey through Arupe. And I thank you really for being here, because your story is just this wonderful, hope-filled story. And your willingness to share it with us, it's a great reminder in some crazy days that we do this for a reason. We do it for you, absolutely, and the 875 other graduates and the 100 kids who will join them, but for your mom and dad and your sister and all our families. It's a great reminder. So thank you for doing that.
No, thank you. It's been such a joy and pleasure to have your mentorship and your love and support throughout the years. And I get to tell you this often, but I truly mean it, and I couldn't say it enough, that where I am today and what the blessings that I'm able to enjoy, they came straight from Arupe, and I am reminded of that every day, and which is why it's so dear to my heart, and I carry it with the love of a family member. And so during this hard time, I think we all stand together, and it's very humbling for me to be able to share this with you. So thank you for the opportunity to do this.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so we'll be wrapping up our first ever Arupe coffee chat. Our thanks, Jose and I virtually thank you, all those who've joined us. It's nice. I know Sherry Vargo has joined us. I've got a little board here to my left, but Sherry's a great friend of Arupe and has served our kids so well for years. Lori Vieira, who is worked with us in development, and we're sitting in such a beautiful campus because of her great efforts,
Yes.
and has been a board member and a member of our work study board. Father Menard, Tom Mallory, Father Marcus's family, and then you'll be happy to know that Dexter and Graham both tuned in this morning.
Oh, wow.
I think they wanted to check in on you and make sure that you hadn't squandered all of their hard work. And I understand that it looks like my sister was even here paying attention, Susan. So
Good.
lots of Arupe friends tuning in this morning, and so happy that they joined us, and so happy that you could carve out a little bit of time in your busy schedule. So God bless everybody out there. Our continued prayers at Arupe for you, your families, and everybody's good health. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.